You may know the story of Rumpelstiltskin, which is a common German fairy tale. The Long Con by Megan Engelhardt gives us a new perspective of the story from Rumpelstiltskin's point of view. I knew the girl would never give up her child. I knew before I asked. That is the sort of deal you only make if you're young, naive, and facing execution. And the idea of a child is so very far away that it is an easy thing to give up. But I asked her anyway, knowing that she would say yes and then say no later. How she wept when I came to collect. The tears that fell over the poor sweet baby. How she begged and pleaded that I spare him, that I release him from her promise. I thought the guessing game was a nice touch. It kept her busy for a few days, and it gave her hope. And all the while I was working, I baked and cleaned and made sure the Queen's messenger heard me singing the naming song in the dark woods. She was so proud when she guessed that name, the triumph in her voice, the relent in her eyes. I put on a show for her, and she ate it like it was porridge that was just the right temperature. How? I screamed. How did you guess that name? I stomped and ripped and shouted. I believe there was spittle, and I am certain that my face turned red. And then I left. I went to my clean cottage that smelled of fresh bread and waited. The child was not yet walking by the time the whole kingdom knew of the twisted man in the deep woods and the clever queen who outsmarted him. The young princeling heard the story at his mother's knee and saw daily the huge rent in the floor where I had stomped my foot in rage. Servants and peasants would watch him pass and whisper about the boy who had been saved. At first it was enough that the story was all about him, and that it ended happily. He enjoyed the attention as any child would. He would demand to hear the story, and when his mother reached the end of the guessing game, the prince would yell out, "Rumpelstiltskin!" right along with her. I heard them in my forest home and smiled, because soon he began to wonder. "Why, Mama?" he asked. "Why did the strange little man want me?" The queen had no answer. The older he grew, the more it ate at him. Why had I asked for him? I could have treasure, powers, half the kingdom had I desired it. Why had I wanted a baby? The princeling was a handsome enough child. His curiosity kept him inside, scorning ancient and dark tombs, when he should have been learning swordsplay and horsemanship. The riddle of his importance drove him to long conferences with grizzled soothsayers and dreary mystics, and old witches who reeked of the potions they brewed. I believe he would have been a good king, had not the mystery ground at him until he was as gnarled in mind as body as the ancients he communed with daily. He was passed over when his father chose an heir, but by then he didn't care, not the curious young prince. 20 years had gone by, and he had no more answers than when he was a bright-eyed baby. So he put his mind to a new pursuit, finding me. He rode away one fogging gray morning, and his mother wept, for she knew she would never see him again. I think she finally realized the truth. I had taken her child after all. He found me. I let him, of course. He stood in my little cottage, as twisted and ugly as I, dripping swamp water all over the floor, and he asked his question. Why? "Consider this your first lesson," I said. "Any common thug can take what they want. The pleasure is in getting the prey to come to you." His eyes gleamed as he saw my words of the promise of power, of knowledge, of the joy of the chase, and I had him. He was mine. Any cut-rate sorcerer can make beauty from dross. The real magic stood before me, a prince become a monster, gold spun down to straw.